the Bane Free Radio Hour.
On the podcast, the near future called and wants people to write a bunch of stories set in it so it can think about how it wants to arrange the furniture before us downtime revelers and marauders arrive and muck up everything. The Ringo-Palooza continues in ebooks, plus we continue the complete audiobook serialization of David Weber's Uncompromising Honor. All right now. Welcome to the Bane Free Radio Hour podcast. It's an honor to have you along. I'm Bane Senior Editor Tony Daniel. We have the third entry and the conclusion in our multi-part interview with David Weber and Jacob Holo this time. David and Jacob discuss their big new time travel space fighting novel, The Valkyrie Protocol. They talk about the characters, all taken from various timelines and universes, the amazing setting of twisted universes, past and future, and the excellent story which involves the Black Plague and an even scarier black hole in time itself. And we continue with the complete audiobook serialization of David Weber's Honor Harrington series masterpiece, Uncompromising Honor. Now here's the news. Don't forget the October post-apocalypse ebook sale. Until the stroke of midnight on Halloween, save big on John Ringo ebooks. Save $2 per ebook in John Ringo's Black Tide Rising original series, plus all John Ringo, everything we have, is $1 off. The sale goes and goes through Halloween. Hey, the 2021 Jim Baen Memorial Short Story Award is now open for submissions. Since its early days, science fiction has played a unique role in human civilization. Its fearless heroes, spectacular technologies, and wondrous futures have inspired many people to make science, technology, and spaceflight a real part of their lives. And in doing so, have often transformed these fictions into reality. The National Space Society and Baen Books applaud the role that science fiction plays in advancing real science and have teamed up to sponsor the short story contest in memory of Jim Baen called the Jim Baen Memorial Short Story Awards. Here's what we want to see: moon bases, Mars colonies, orbital habitats, space elevators, asteroid mining, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, realistic spacecraft, heroic sacrifice, adventure. I think you know what we're talking about here. What we don't want to see is stories that show technology or space travel as evil or bad in itself, although there can be problems in the stories. We don't want to see a bunch of galactic far future empires. That's another kind of story, paranormal, UFO stuff, zombies. We have awards for those. But this one is about a positive spin on near-future space. All the rules and details for making a submission are on the Bane.com website right there in the Contest and Awards menu pull down. The contest is open through February 1st, 2021, so you got time. The 10 finalists will be announced in March. I'll be one of the judges. And we usually get a cool celebrity author judge like David Drake or David Weber. The grand prize will be published as the featured story at Bane.com on the main page website right there. And you'll get paid at the normal paying rates that professional stories get. The author will also receive an engraved, this really cool award that we give out. And you get free entry into the 2021 International Space Development Conference and a year's membership in the National Space Society. Very cool. There are second and third place winners who also get free entry into the 2021 International Space Development Conference, the ISDC, which is always fun. I've been to several of them and they are really cool. and lots of Bane swag as well. So if you have a great story about humanity's near future in space just waiting to get told, write it up and send that story in. This is part 3 and the conclusion of a multi-part interview with David Weber and Jacob Holo talking about the Valkyrie Protocol. I want to welcome David Weber and Jacob Holo to the podcast. Hello, folks, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
It's wonderful to have you back in Technicolor this time. David Weber is the creator of the Honor Harrington series, the Oath of the Sword series, and, well, about a billion other series, including one called the Gordian Division. There are more than 8 million copies of his books in print, and 33 titles so far have made the New York Times bestseller list, according to Marla Ainspan here, our tabulator.
And she should know, yeah.
She should know. Who is the associate publisher at Bain, by the way. He's collaborated with many excellent authors, including Starfire on the Starfire series with Steve White, the Empire Man series with John Ringo, the Multiverse series more recently with Joel Presby, Linda Evans before, the Ring of Fire series with Eric Flint, among others. And that's just to touch on some of the things that David has done. And now the Gordian Division series with Jacob Holo. Jacob Holo graduated from Youngstown State University with a degree in electrical and controls engineering. He is the author of 8 books, including 2 Gordian Division novels written with David Weber. Between novels, Jacob enjoys gaming of all sorts, whether video gaming, card gaming, miniature wargaming, or watching speedruns on YouTube. He is a former Ohioan, which is a very difficult thing to say, by the way. I practiced a former Ohioan.
Well, you realize I was born in Cleveland.
You are a former Clevelander.
I am a former Ohioan Clevelander. Very former in my case.
Former Michigander, who now lives in South Carolina with his wife boss and his cat boss. And out now at booksellers everywhere is the Valkyrie Protocol, which really looks cool when I hold it up because it's green. It's very ghostly.
Yeah.
When you look at it.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. So,
ooh.
I think that
one of the reasons why I once swore that I would never, ever write a time travel novel until David Weber proposed that we write a time travel novel together.
Try it. You'll like it.
What was kind of my issues with a lot of time travel rule sets. Now there are some out there that I do like. But one of the things that an issue that I have with a lot of them is you have all these time travel manipulations, but what is enforcing a sequence upon them? What says that one time travel intervention happens after another time travel intervention?
Why can't you continuously leapfrog to get in front of things?
And by establishing a absolute clock, we have, an absolute sequence of events that, and we know as authors, and we can communicate to the readers, this intervention happens before this, and before this.
You can't go back and kill somebody to keep him from doing something he's already done. Okay. Now, you could theoretically go back and kill him to keep him from doing what he's done, but that would only happen in somebody else's past, not yours. Okay. And that's why one of our reviewers on the Gordian Protocol really liked it. He said, but they never explain why Shigeki can't just go back and kill Raybert. Well, it's because killing Raybert won't do Shigeki any good, if he doesn't stop him before Raybert figures out how to fix the problem and Shigeki's universe goes out like a soap bubble. Okay. And I think the reviewer missed that, which I thought we had made about as clear as we could without, printing that particular section of the book in red or something. Part of the problem for any novel, but I think especially for science fiction, is that, as I've said many times, it's a collaboration between the writer and the reader, because the reader is filling in huge amounts of information that the writer has not communicated specifically to them. That's one of the strengths of science fiction. One of the weaknesses of science fiction is that if somebody has decided that you're doing this a certain way, you're using a particular trope or whatever, that's how they read it, whether that's what you did or not. And then they judge the success or failure of the book on the basis of what they think you were trying to do, rather than what you were actually trying to do. And it's not your fault, and it's not really their fault. It's just a case of, okay, they got off onto the wrong interpretation of,
but
of what you're saying.
that's a problem with all genre things.
Yeah, it is. But
bring expectations that other writers have created within them.
well, I think that's true, but I think it's more true for science fiction, because we are not working with a historical reality where, you know, this isn't something where somebody can say, well, what happened in 1945, you know, or 2020, you know, what's the technologies work? Because that's already all filled in. Okay, you know what it is, what it was, what it could be. Okay, with science fiction, we're inviting you into a world that hasn't happened yet. And therefore, there is a lot more room for you to misunderstand how it's happening, because you don't have that concrete yardstick that you can look at.
And there's problems with what's metaphorical and what's actually like, you know, happening. So.
Well, I've used that deliberately in the past. For example, in the Honor Harrington books, the tendency of people to fill in the blanks. Okay, I convinced, I'm sure 99% of my readers that the People's Republic of Haven was France, by naming somebody Rob Espierre and giving them the tennis court oath and the whole 9 yards. And the whole time I was doing that, I was doing it deliberately to keep them from realizing that particular original form of government was built on a totally different model that I was going to restore at the end. I kept everybody expecting Napoleon to ride in on his white horse and become emperor. And instead, what I was bringing up on the other side here was the reformer who was going to restore the previous government. And one way I kept people from realizing who the reformer was by keeping them from looking for one at all. They were looking for Napoleon. So you
were playing four-dimensional meta genre chess with the reader.
I don't understand why people
for their own amusement.
But yeah, it's the art of storytelling is in communicating your vision strongly enough that the vision of your audience works. Movies, playwrights, you know, they're dealing with a whole different spectrum of the information that they can present. It's the difference between radio and television. Okay, except that in non-audiobook literary fiction, you have to even provide the voice for each character. Okay, that's how completely the reader has to be involved in the process. And I think that successful storytelling requires you to be aware that that's how it works. That's why I think that the pacing of sentences is so important. Why I think punctuation is so important. Verb choice is so important. Because that's how you shape what your reader is perceiving. How you communicate the energy in the scene, the whole 9 yards.
You're allowing them to create the stage in their mind and the action and the characters. You have to, because they have to put the show on for themselves.
Yeah. And it's something that you can only learn really by doing. I think some people have a greater natural gift for it than others, but it's like Toni Weisskopf is fond of saying, you know, and she and I agreed on this. It's like a physical skill. You learn it by doing it. And one of the reasons that I'm doing as many collaborations as I'm doing now is, you know, I tell people, they say, how did you learn to write? And I said, you know, how did you learn to walk? because I'm not going all zen on them. What I'm saying is it's a similar process. You fall down a lot when you're learning to walk, and each time you do, you learn a little bit about keeping your balance. You get back up, and you can walk a little better next time. It's the same way with writing. You know, you write, and some of it works, and some of it doesn't. You learn from the mistakes, and you keep going. Well, I've been doing that for a long, long time now.
Yeah.
And
you've moved into a mentoring phase that you've talked about before with us.
Yeah. Yeah, and I you know, Jacob, let me put it to you this way. I firmly believe that Jacob is going to do very, very well as an independent, traditionally published writer. Okay, the talent is there, absolutely, and so if I can help him, number one, learn some of the stuff that I've learned by falling down and then getting back up without him having to bruise himself. Okay. And by the same token, if I can help him get exposure to a readership who will appreciate the quality of the stuff that he does, then that's absolutely something that I should be doing. I'm not claiming any great virtue in this, but it is literally something that I can't not do. Okay. I think I owe some of that to Roger Zelazny, because he was kind of my example of the guy at the top of his craft when I came along. Some of it, I'm sure, I owe to my parents, my upbringing. But it's, much as I like Jacob, it's not because I like Jacob that I feel this way. It's because I am looking at all of the decades of stories that he can create, that I'm confident he will create.
Yeah. Well, you're doing it for the readers. That's
in a way, yeah. It's kind of like I've told people, you know, it's like, yeah, I'm worried about my literary legacy, but if it's a choice between my literary legacy and Sharon getting the kids through college or something like that, God, yes, bring somebody else in to write the books. All right. However, my belief is that the only times in which a series has been successfully taken over by another writer, with a very, very few exceptions, Kevin Anderson is probably the primary example of that. It's been by someone who was already involved in the series or was already working with the original author of the series. That's how the transition happened. Okay. And it's not that the new guy is writing exactly what the old guy would have written, but it's that there's a continuity. There's a voice that transmits, and there is a respect for the characters that was learned by the new writer in working with and conversation with the original author, if you see what I'm saying. And so in some respects, if I can find somebody who I would be comfortable with, and Bain would be comfortable with, and Sharon would be comfortable with, to continue the Honorverse or one of the other series, if something happens to me or whatever, then that's obviously a worthwhile side benefit. Okay. And I think probably Jacob could do that. I think that his comfort zone for his writing voice is different enough from mine. What you're finding in the Valkyrie Protocol and the Gordian Protocol is a fusion of our voices. I think his individual voice is significantly different from my individual voice. I'm not saying good, bad. I'm just saying different. Okay? So I'm thinking that, for example, if he were to be writing Honorverse novels down the road, that he'd have to take kind of the approach that Phil Pornell and I are taking toward the Tran novels, which is we're not going to try to write Jerry-style books. Mm-hmm. And we're going to we're going to create new characters that we're going to bring in while leaving the established characters very much the way that they are. And I would think that coming at it that way, okay, Jacob could very easily write Honorverse novels.
Well, you're
down the
not
road.
done yet, David.
No. I turned 60. I turned 68 this month. Okay, so I should be good for quite a while yet. All right.
Certainly hope so.
Well, I will say that fall in Atlanta changed my perspective quite a bit, because of the fact that it just pretty much totally shut me down for a year and a half, 2 years. I mean, I couldn't write at all. And then I started, and I was writing. I could work. One of the reasons I'm doing as many collaborations as I am is that doing collaborations helped pull me through the writing process, because I was working with someone else, and there was, that synergy was involved there. But it's only, well, let's put it this way. I had a scene in A Call to Insurrection, the novel that Tim Zahn and Tom and I are working on. I had a scene that took me 5 weeks to write. And it was originally going to be like a 5,000 word scene. It wound up being about 16,000. Okay, but it took me 5 weeks to write that. And on the day when
That's a really long time in David Weber world.
Oh, well, my output traditionally when I'm in the swing on a book is between 5,000 and 7,000 words a day. Okay, and it took me 5 weeks. Part of it was I kept finding reasons why the original scene wouldn't work, and after a while, it kind of took on a life of its own as something that, I guess, avoidance was kicking into it too. But I
David,
finally
you were having some physical. I mean, you had heart issues and other things, and I've physically seen you. You are a healthier person today than you were a couple of 3, 4, or 5 years ago.
Well, that's probably true, except unless we're talking mentally, But what I was going to say is I finally got that done and off.
Mm-hmm.
And yesterday, in about 8 hours, I wrote a 7,800 word short story for the Lest Darkness Fall anthology that will be coming out in about a year. And it was good. Okay. And so it's kind of like, okay, I'm out of jail on the scene that was hanging over me. But I think it's also a sign that I am. Short stories are discrete bites. Novels aren't. So I'm still not sure where I'm going to be when I get, fully into the swing into working on a solo novel again. But I think the general indications are good, and Jacob here is part of the reason that I'm getting back online. Especially Jacob, when I had to go in to do the historical components of the Valkyrie Protocol, and I was doing my research, and I was really, getting into it was so good for me. And yet, on a solo project, I probably would have been still sitting there going, where do I want to go with this? Do you see what I'm saying? So the structure of the collaboration was a big help to me.
Well, that's the rich part of the book for me, is that all that stuff that happens in Constantinople and in Byzantine. It's really cool stuff.
Well, I hadn't realized until I started doing the research that we had Ephram to work with. Now I took some liberties.
Patriarch Ephram, who is a Greek Orthodox, I guess, in the Byzantine sense.
Yes. But an absolutely fascinating historical character, a guy who was a general, who was a count, who was a patriarch, the whole 9 yards, and who becomes Theodora's savior, really, I think.
He's somebody who is able to understand that she's not a demon.
Well, that's part of it, but he's also able to explain to her why she's doing what she's doing in a way that she's never, it's not that she has doubts about what she's doing, okay? But most of us don't fully understand why we are doing things that are hugely important to us. There's
what
so
she's
much
doing is
packed
trying
up
to
in who we
play.
are. Yes. And he's like, he's telling her in effect, okay, look, I don't care what you may have done in the past when you didn't know these people were real or anything else. I'm dealing with who you are. And who you are is a good person. Okay?
Yeah.
Samuel had told Theodora that.
Yeah, but Samuel Pepys doesn't have the moral authority.
That's true. That's true.
Ephraim.
Well, it depends on how you define moral.
Yes.
One of the reasons
You want to
that
talk about,
one of the reasons that I
the best
wanted
soft
to
porn
use
sites
Peeps,
and
one of
throughout
the reasons I wanted
time.
to use Peeps was the stuff that he tucked away in his journal. And
Hmm.
Jacob actually has a scene here where one of the characters in the admin, female character, is they're talking about some guy named Peeps, and she says, "Oh yes, Samuel Pepys," and they're like, "You know who they're talking about?" I says, "Oh yes, I read his journals." You know, I said, "Why?" Because I learned all kinds of words for female anatomy that I hadn't known before. That's Samuel Pepys. Okay.
Yeah, quite a character.
Yeah. I really,
Well, Ephraim
really,
seems to be, to me, he's a really good priest character, a spiritual character.
Yeah.
That really embodies the best of Christianity.
yeah. Well, I try. Christianity is important to me on a personal level. I'm a historian, so I also know that there have been way too many times when so-called Christians didn't live up to the requirements of their faith. Okay. Or when they made accommodations with their faith in the name of secular power or whatever, Paris is worth a mass. You know, there's all kinds of examples of it. So I think that it's incumbent upon me as a writer, us as storytellers, to play fair with religion, to play fair with the people who are true to their beliefs and embody the best of their beliefs, but also to make room for the characters who aren't. You can see it very clearly in my books by that other publisher, Safehold. That's where I grapple with it most explicitly. But Ephraim, he's an example of that same thought. We don't, Jacob, do we really have a bad patriarch except for what's his name, the one that Justinian sends out? And he's not so much bad. He's just more like, I know which side of the bread my butter is on, and the emperor told me to go do this. But do we actually have? There are references in there to the fact that this is a period when orthodoxy was hugely important, and monks would beat each other up in the street over differences of theological distinction. Eric did that very well in the Belisarius books. And we don't deal with it as much here, but there's a little bit of an undertone of that. But I don't think we actually have a bad priest in this one. Of course,
so many pages in the book, David.
well, and also actually the character set from the 6th century is not huge. Okay. It feels bigger than it actually is if you sit down and look at it closely, because of the stage that they're working on. For example, when Narcissus turns up, Narcissus is probably only in there for what, 25, 30 pages? And he's very important in those 25 or 30 pages, but he's scarcely what you would call a central character of the 6th century storyline. Okay, he has a function to serve in telling the story more than anything else. Now, I will say that one thing that Jacob and I both do, it's almost a compulsion for me, is I don't have any characters who are named lieutenant or the sergeant or the captain. Any character that I have, by God, he has a name, or she has a name. And I usually jot down a little bit of a physical description of them, and most of them have some characteristic that I'm tagging them to in my brain when I insert them into the book. And I think that's one reason why people talk about the number of characters that I have in my books. Okay, it's not that I have that many critically important characters. It's just that anybody that I have in there, in my mind, is a character in his or her own right.
Your spear carriers come to life.
Yeah, well, and they have literally done that in books in the Honorverse. Okay, characters who were introduced as minor characters and then left alone for 2 books. 10 years later, they'll re-enter the lives of the protagonists, and 10 years have passed for them too, and they've grown and they've changed. And I think that that's a strength that Jacob and I share to a significant level. I mean, if you look at the characters, Jacob, that you created in the Gordian Protocol.
Well, there's actually one particular character in the Gordian Protocol, and she's barely around. She isn't around for very long.
She gets dead.
But
Hinnenkamp.
She may be showing up again.
You're talking about our security person. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, she gets very dead in the Gordian. I mean, really, really thoroughly dead. But of course, since that entire universe went away, the original of her is still alive in admin. We have several characters we could do that with, really. But no, I remember.
But I think
I thought you were talking about Hinnenkamp, who's one of my favorite characters you came up with. But no, I know exactly who you're talking about, and yes, I'm looking forward to her return too.
Because she really wasn't, a huge character. There's just, maybe a paragraph or 2 describing Susan Cantrell's mindset before she meets an untimely end in that book.
Yes.
So, do you have a title you like for the 3rd book yet, or?
David, do we have a title yet?
No, we do not have a title.
We do not have a title.
Okay.
Probably
it
won't
wouldn't
have
matter if I did. Tony would change it.
I am waiting for my senior partner to tell me what the title is, as I have waited on the previous 2 books.
Did I ever tell you how the short Victorious War got named? I found out that Tony's in-house name for it was Honor Gets Laid, and that inspired me to come up with a real title for her really, really quick. Okay, she knows how to motivate her writers.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the things that is, it's an irony I think the readers will appreciate, is that Klaus Wilhelm is interacting almost routinely when he interacts with the admin delegation to Siskov with the admin version of the person who killed his wife and his daughters, and he doesn't know it. Because the guy from the admin who he's interacting with had nothing to do with the death of his wife and daughters. But every time that he enters the same room that the delegation is in, he is in the presence, in one sense, of the man who killed his wife and daughters and who he then killed. And that, I think, is one of the more, I won't say delicious, but one of the more intriguing ironies of the way that we finally wound up setting up how these universes work. Because that universe that's gone, okay, neither side of the 2 universes that are left really knows who did what and why in that one that's gone. But the readers Jacob and I do.
We know.
We are the shadow. We know what evil lurks in the hearts of men. Yeah.
Well, this is one of the great, the fact that you have exploited this wonderful, paradox of a great science fiction idea. This is the kind of story you can only tell, this with a time travel setup or a multiverse setup.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can sort of metaphorically tell it in a mainstream sort of way, but to really get the visceral feel of it, you got to write it as science fiction. That's one of the great things about science fiction.
Well, one of the things that's really interesting to me about this series is the contrast between it and my Hell's Gate Multiverse series, because it's a totally different approach to how you're going to handle the divergent universes, because everything is identical, blah, 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 blah. But there's no overlap of human beings. If you exist in one universe, you're not going to exist in the other universe. It's two totally separate groups in that sense. And this is kind of the other way around. A lot of places, all places have the same place names, but the people who live there are not the same folks. So it's for me, it's a good change of pace. Joelle and I need to get back to Hell's Gate. We've been talking about that.
But what you're working on now, I think you're working on an Universe book with Eric that you've almost.
Yes. I am waiting on that from Eric. He and I have talked about what the part of it that I need to write, but I can't really write it until I've seen how he structured the part that he's doing.
This is another in the Crown of Slave sequence.
Yeah, we don't know what we're going to call it yet. Neither of us likes any of the titles we've come up with yet. But Crown's not going to work for this one. And also, it's a direct fusion of the Crown storylines with the main storyline of the war against the Solarians and the fallout from it. So,
what's the little guy's name in that series?
Victor Kasha or Damien Harahap?
There's two spies. One of them,
Anton and Victor are his.
Victor.
Yeah, Victor is the. Hi, I am a choir boy. Excuse me, you're in the way. Zap and kind of keep going. He's a very interesting character. And
I think we should call it the Victor Gets Laid book. I mean,
no, because that's been going on for a while. I mean, ever since.
I'll suggest that to Tony, and we can.
Do not suggest that to Tony, because then I would have to kill a character named Tony Daniels in a book.
I see.
You would force my hand. I would have no.
You wouldn't be the first author that killed me in a book.
That's true.
I got crucified last time.
Hey, it's anything worth doing is worth doing well.
Mm-hmm.
At least nobody's done to you what John did to Buckley. Okay, I mean, my God, it's all the AIs are Buckleys, and they all go insane eventually. So every one of them dies. I'm like, ooh, I wish I'd thought of that. Well.
So that will be coming probably next in Universe land.
Yeah, I think Tony told me that she's planning it for like October, November, in time for Christmas, which would be about right if Eric gets it to me shortly. In addition, I have the manuscript from Jacob, and I also have the manuscript for the next Star Kingdom novel from Jane. I haven't even looked at that yet. I need to, but I've been deliberately staying away from it because I had to focus on other stuff.
The Stephanie Harrington books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I say, I've just finished the scene that has been hanging Tim up for forever on A Call to Insurrection, and I think he has a window to work in, so that probably would be forthcoming pretty soon.
What do we call that? Manticore Ascendant?
The Manticore Ascendant series.
That's Travis Long as our main character. Yeah.
And Richard Fox and I have turned in the first volume of right this minute. I think we're calling it. Tony and I went back and forth over what we were going to call the series, and I think we wound up calling it like Empire Ascendant or something like that. But it's essentially the story of.
That's Governor, which is
but it's whatever the heck we're going to call the series, Colin Governor, because that's the first volume in it. He's a governor at this point. He hasn't yet become a rebel or
slated for next summer.
Yeah,
and it is related to Path of the Fury.
Yeah, it's a prequel to Path of the Fury, like 300-400 years before it, and it's basically the creation. It's the creation of the empire that Alicia DeVries serves in the Fury novel, depending on how you want to look at it. And in fact, 2/3 of the action in this book takes place on in the New Dublin system, which is the system that Alicia's maternal family comes from. And when you get done reading this book, you will begin to understand exactly why loyalty to the crown is a really big thing in her hometown. But I'm pleased with the book, and I think readers are going to like it. Not as much as some of them would like a sequel to Path of the Fury. The number of people who want to see more Ferhat bin Belkacem or more Alicia and Megara, I understand why they do. Okay, but this is the story that I need to be telling right now.
Well, that's going to be the next Weber from Bane, isn't it?
I think
Governor.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. No, okay, Valkyrie just dropped, so it's out now.
Yeah, well, Valkyrie is our
yeah,
big book right now.
I know. So yeah, I think probably that is good. Now, the next solo novel that I'm going to do, that I have to do, is in the Safehold series, and the one after that, the next solo novel, will be the sequel to Sword of the South. Tony has told me that that's what she wants me to do next, and I need to do that. That is actually a series where I know what's going to happen in each book, which is very unusual for me. So once I get into it, I should be able to write it.
That's where you got that redheaded guy now going.
Yeah.
Ken
Houghton, yes.
What is your barbarian's name again?
It's not a barbarian.
Well,
he's very sophisticated. Well, yeah. Brandark is more sophisticated than the Bazel is, but yeah, it's Bazel is a lot more sophisticated.
That's cool. That's your big fantasy series.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I need to get that moving. Although I will tell you that if I do my job right, when you read the last line of the last volume in that series, you'll realize I played you all the way through, and that 2 or 3 of the main characters are not who you thought they were all the way through the book. And you'll have to go back and reread it because you thought it was written on 2 levels and it was actually written on 3. Nanny boo.
Well, as long as they don't turn out to be characters from the French Revolution.
No, that's not going to happen. And nobody's going to wake up in a shower and say none of that really happened.
Or they're all Cylons.
Yeah, well, yes, not going to do that either.
That would be bad.
But if Bobby would just wake up in the shower and let us reset 2020, I'd be up for reruns of Dallas. I mean, that's how desperate I am.
That would be nice. Well, what else do we want to say about the Valkyrie Protocol? I think we've plumbed a lot of it that we can talk about. It's a great, it's adventurous and yet has a lot of poignant moments in it that are brought about by the very nature of the time travel story.
Well, by the nature of the time travel story and by the nature of the human beings involved. I mean, Teodora has to make some really, really hard decisions. And in one way, she didn't have any decisions to make at all because the situation is, events are in motion that she can't stop. But she has to deal with it and decide what role she's going to take in the events ongoing. And I think her final... her final line in the novel really sums it all up. And I have to say that for me, in many respects, the most poignant moment, certainly that I had the main hand in crafting in the book, occurs in the final chapter when Raybert is sitting there with a virtual book in his lap, as it were, because of what that book is and what it represents. I think that really speaks to where Jacob and I are both coming from in terms of why it matters what you do. Would you say that was fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably a great way to end it. there's so much more we could go on and on, but this is the Valkyrie Protocol out at booksellers everywhere. The one you get will not be invisible. That's right.
It's not invisible. It's just translucent.
That's right. You'll be able to see the print in your copy by David Weber and Jacob Holo. Guys, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this really great novel.
We had fun with it.
Yes,
You remember I said that I'd only do a collaboration if I thought it would be at least as strong as either of us would have done alone. I think this book is stronger than either of us would have done alone. And that's what the goal is, really, ultimately, when you do a collaboration, is to have it come out being better than you would have done by yourself. And I think we accomplished that with this one, Jacob.
I think we did.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much.
Well, thank you.
Here is another entry in David Weber's Honor Harrington series masterpiece, Uncompromising Honor. Honor keeps her promise. The Solarian League. For hundreds of years they have borne the banner of human civilization, but the bureaucratic mandarins who rule today's League are corrupt and looking for scapegoats. They've decided the upstart Star Kingdom of Manticore must be annihilated. Uncompromising courage. Honor Harrington has worn the Star Kingdom's uniform for half a century. Very few know war the way Honor Harrington does. So far, hers has been a voice of caution. But now the Mandarins have committed atrocities such as the galaxy has not known in 1,000 years. They have finally killed too many of the people Honor Harrington loves. Uncompromising vengeance. Now Honor Harrington is coming for the Solarian League, and hell is riding in her wake. And now, David Weber's Uncompromising Honor.
Tarducci Tower, City of a Proto, Genovese System. "So, Admiral," Commissioner Hirokichi Floyd said as his butler poured the after-dinner wine, set the bottle at his elbow, and withdrew. "I assume you're eager to depart and get on with it?" "We're certainly ready anyway, Commissioner," Vice Admiral Hoidu Gyozo replied. He lifted his wineglass and sipped, then set it back down with a rather tight smile. Shifting targets at such a late date offered a bit of a challenge, since all our planning had focused on Exapia, but the truth is that there's not really much change in the parameters of the operation. He shrugged. More a matter of plugging in new names and addresses than confronting any new threats or logistics issues. We've completed all of our preparations and pre-op planning, and we'll translate out Thursday at 0730. After that, he shrugged again. "After that, Admiral," Floyd's piercing green eyes flashed, "Buccaneer will teach the friggin' manties and their arse-kissers that, as my Uncle Chojiro used to say, when you fuck with the bull, you get the horns." Indeed. Admiral Hoidu produced another smile. It wasn't easy because what he wanted to do was roll his eyes. Unlike Floyd, who was a product of one of Old Terra's mega-herb towers, Hoidu had been born and raised on the planet Krishul Negru, on a 12,000-hectare cattle ranch. He rather doubted Uncle Chojiro had possessed any personal experience with irate cattle of either sexual persuasion, and having personally dealt with very irate 2,000-kilo genetically enhanced Chyanina bulls upon more than one occasion, he'd always loathed that particular cliché and the people who seemed so fond of it. Then again, there was a lot to loathe about Uncle Chojiro's nephew, too. "The arrogant bastards have it coming," the commissioner continued. He drained his own wineglass in a single swallow and refilled it from the bottle without ever looking away from Hoidu. "God only knows how many people they've already gotten killed." "Indeed," Hoidu repeated. He found that non-committal response useful in dealing with people who could be relied upon to interpret it as agreeing with whatever the hell it was they'd just said. "I'm looking forward to your after-action report, Admiral." Floyd showed his teeth. "I don't think anybody in Manticore is going to enjoy reading it, though." "Indeed," Hoidu said yet again, and shook his head mentally as the repetition sailed right by Floyd. That was another thing the word was good for. The number of times in a row he could repeat it before it produced a reaction was a faithful barometer of his current audience's stupidity. And despite the misleading impression of mental acuity produced by the commissioner's piercing eyes, the Admiral suspected he could set a new record with Floyd if he really put his mind to it. The commissioner only smiled broadly at him, but Hoydu reminded himself that just because Floyd was stupid didn't mean he couldn't be dangerous in the Byzantine infighting of the Solarian League's entrenched bureaucracy. Someone of his towering incompetency wouldn't hold a sector governorship, even of one as piss-poor as the Genovese sector, unless he had the right gutter fighter instincts and patrons at a high level. He was not the sort with whom a prudent flag officer engaged in pissing contests, which was a pity given his record to date. I agree with him that the Manties need to be taken down a peg or three, Hoydu thought from behind his answering smile. I'm not happy about the change in targets for our op, and neither were some of my staff people, but I'm not going to shed many tears for it at the end of the day. Any of the Manties' buddies who get run over along the way only have to look in the mirror to see who pasted the target on their backs, and looking after their interests is nowhere in my job description. I'm no more eager to trash star systems than the next man, but I'm a Solarian officer. My loyalty's to the League and its vital interests, not theirs. And anything that makes the Manti supporters, any of their supporters, rethink their positions can't be all bad. And whatever I may think of Floyd, he's got a point about this op. Hoydu's nostrils flared just a bit, a minute change of expression his staff would have recognized as his equivalent of a shouted profanity at that thought. Neobarb neutrals are one thing, but someone who chooses to stab the League in the back when it's his responsibility to represent it deserves whatever the hell he gets, in spades. Still, even this cretin ought to realize it's not just the Manties getting people killed. The Manties may be the ones pulling the trigger, but fair's fair, Governor. It's idiots like you, and certain other idiots in old Chicago, who keep shoving our people in front of them before they do. In fairness, Floyd hadn't gotten anyone killed, yet. Not for lack of trying, though. And while no actual blood had been shed, there'd been plenty of other consequences, including the sudden end of one of Hoydu's personal friend's career. Liam Pyun had made Floyd look bad 5 months ago by showing the moral courage to disobey the governor's direct and suicidal orders in the Zunker system, and in the Solarian League, embarrassing a superior, especially one who deserved it, was the only truly unforgivable sin. I'm sure he wishes we were headed back to Zunker to beat the hell out of the Manties who helped humiliate him, but maybe even he's smart enough to realize the real basis for target selection has a hell of a lot more to do with hitting the Manties where they aren't than going toe-to-toe with them. Not yet, anyway. I suppose I shouldn't say this, Admiral, the Commissioner continued like a man confiding in a lifetime friend, but there's a part of me that actually hopes they'll be stupid enough to refuse your demands. I'd just as soon not see anyone killed, but... He tapped an index finger heavily on the table for emphasis. It's about friggin' time people figured out there are consequences for supporting rogue regimes like Manticore. Indeed, Vice Admiral Hoydu replied. HMS Phantom, Task Group 110, Beowulf System. I just got off the comm with Admiral Truman, Rear Admiral Jan Katoch told the men and women around the briefing room table aboard HMS Phantom. A Nike-class battlecruiser, barely 17 months old and built by Partibitsa Shipbuilding in its Hephaestus module, Phantom was 2.5 million tons of lethality, the fastest and most deadly broadside-armed warship in the galaxy. The Royal Manticoran Navy needed about 10 times as many of her as it actually had, and under other circumstances, it would have had most of them. Unfortunately, almost 80 of her sisters had died stillborn when the Yawata strike tore Hephaestus and Vulcan apart. Katoch was even better aware than most of how sorely those dead ships were missed, since he'd been slated to command an entire squadron of them. That squadron had died with Hephaestus, however, along with entirely too many of the men and women he'd already come to know. 85% of the squadron's 6,000 personnel had been aboard ship or elsewhere on Hephaestus preparing to take over their new ships from the yard dogs. None of them had survived. A charmed ship, he thought, looking at the shrouded, ghostly figure on Phantom's bulkhead-mounted crest. That's what they call her anyway, and who knows, they may even be right. In the absence of the squadron's other Nikes, the Admiralty was building him a replacement out of Saganami Cs and Saganami Bs, with emphasis on the latter. The Charlies were in almost as urgent demand as the Nikes themselves, and he'd been warned that he'd be lucky to see a single full-strength division of them. Unfortunately, it would be at least 2 more T weeks before he even knew how many of them he'd be receiving. Although he'd been formally named as Commanding Officer Designate Task Group 110.2, which would ultimately become a Vest Pocket Task Force, and one cut for a generous-sized vest, all he had at the moment was Phantom and the Saganami B-class cruisers Cinqueda, Shikumizui, and Talwar, supported by a single Roland-class destroyer, HMS Arngrim. He'd been supposed to receive the Silak Vukodlak last week, but she'd suffered a major impeller room engineering casualty 2 weeks before that, and the Beowulf yards would need at least another 10 days to put her back in service. In fact, 10 days would be something of a miracle, given that they'd been required to replace no less than 4 of her after-beta nodes. So, at the moment, he was a task group commander with all of 5 ships under his command. The Admiral, he continued now, had just finished a conversation with Director of State Longacre, and Director of State Longacre had just finished a conversation with Special Representative Lambrou and Special Representative Tsakabiku, which is the reason Admiral Truman was talking to me and the reason that I'm talking to you. He smiled without very much humor. We have our movement orders, people, he said, and several of his officers stiffened in obvious surprise. Movement orders, sir? Captain Jim Clark repeated after the briefest of pauses, and Katoch smiled a bit more broadly. Movement orders, he confirmed. It would appear President Vangelis has changed his mind about an Allied presence in his star system. Clark sat back in his chair, eyebrows raised, and Katoch shrugged. It's not really hard to understand why his administration didn't want us there to begin with, Jim, he pointed out. We've been careful to keep any fleet units out of Beowulf orbit during the debate over the referendum. The Hypatian government had even better reasons to avoid any appearance that their referendum vote was coerced by foreign warships. Agreed, sir. Clark nodded. I'm just wondering what's changed. According to Lambrou and Sakabiku, what's changed is that the most probable outcome of the referendum's become abundantly clear. The Rear Admiral paused and looked around the briefing room until every head had nodded. Brad Lambrou and Sophronia Sakabiku were the designated Hypatian special representatives to Beowulf. Technically, they were simply observers of the Beowulfan plebiscite. Actually, they were Adam Vangelis' ambassadors to the star system with which he intended to seek formal political union as soon as his referendum validated his intent and Beowulf got its own slower-paced plebiscite out of the way. Apparently, Katoch continued, something new has been added to the mix in Hypatia. That calm conversation between McCartney and Abruzzi, sir? Lieutenant Albemonte, Katoch's electronic warfare officer, asked. News of the leaked soundbite and the first intimations of Hypatia's fiery reaction to it had reached Beowulf over a T-week ago. Sounds like it. Katoch shrugged. Never underestimate the pure fury that kind of talk can generate, Paul, whether there's any serious intent behind it or not. I really doubt even McCartney or Abruzzi thought they could get away with any kind of decapitation of the Hypatian government. Mind you, they are Solis, and Mandarins for that matter, so anything's possible. But I'm pretty sure that even if that's even really their voices, they never had any intention of pursuing that nonsense as an actual policy. Nobody in Hypatia seems inclined to give them the benefit of the doubt, however, which, let's face it, isn't such a bad thing from our viewpoint. A very clarifying thing, moral outrage. If I had $1 for every time emotions trumped reason, or for that matter gotten behind reason and pushed like hell, I'd be Klaus Hauptmann. Several people chuckled and he grinned. Then his expression sobered. Whether it was the mention of intervention battalions or something else, Lambrou and Sakabiku told Director Longacre that it's no longer a question of whether or not the referendum's going to pass. It's not even a question of whether or not it'll be a landslide. The only real question in Vangelis's mind now is how big a landslide it'll be. At any rate, he's confident enough of the outcome, and I think that calm conversations made him nervous enough about how the Mandarins are likely to respond when they hear the vote total that he's decided to go ahead and invite us now. The referendum's scheduled for next Wednesday. If we leave within 48 hours, we'll hit Hypatia sometime Thursday. That'll keep us out of the system until after the vote's counted, or until enough of it's been counted to project the outcome with certainty, at any rate, but also close up the window in which the Solis can just waltz into Hypatia unopposed. Sir, I understand what you're saying. Commander Marketa Ilkova, TG-110.2's operations officer designate, was 5 centimeters shorter than her admiral. She was also attractive, with red hair and sharp, intelligent blue-green eyes. Indeed, Kotoch had discovered she was rather more attractive than he might have wished, given the restrictions of Article 119. She was also at least as competent as she was attractive, and obviously less than delighted by the news of their impending departure. But we're still all the task group you've got. And we're more than enough to beat the holy living hell out of any light Soli squadron that comes our way, Kotoch pointed out, with just a bit more confidence than he actually felt. Then he sighed. Admiral Truman doesn't expect us to hold off a fleet the size of Filaretta's or Crandall's, Marketa, but Director Longacre's made the point, and it's a valid one, people, that if Hypatia's willing to pin a big target on its chest by standing up beside the Alliance, the least we can do is provide President Vangelis' citizens with visible, tangible proof the Alliance will be just as determined to look after them as we are to look after our own star systems. Nobody in Hypatia is likely to mistake 5 ships, even Queen ships, for a system defense fleet, but what they'll see are the lead elements of the task group that will be capable of defending them when it's fully assembled. And it won't hurt a bit for us to be there, getting a feel for the system astrography, and establishing a working relationship with Vangelis and his people while we wait for the rest of the task group to join us. Understood, sir, Ilkova said. Admiral Truman assures me she'll send forward at least 4 more Bravos within the next 7 or 8 days, and Vukodlak should be out of the Yard Dog's hands a couple of days after that. As soon as she's finished testing her repairs, she'll be sent to join us, along with a freighter load or 2 of system defense pods. And by the time she gets to Hypatia, we'll have worked out the best way to use her and be ready to start deploying the pods.
That was another entry in the complete serialization of Uncompromising Honor by David Weber. And that's it for the podcast. Thanks to Audible.com and to podcast theme composer Ruth Judkowitz. And an audience with a wise and whimsical labradoodle who guards the gateway to that very dangerous ride, the Dimension Mixer, at the amusement park at the end of time, plus thanks, praise, and gratitude for David Weber and Jacob Holo, authors of the Valkyrie Protocol. Please join us next time here at the hammering heart of science fiction and fantasy, and keep reaching for the stars.